Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? And welcome to YPG Gaming's texture tutorial with me, the ever wonderful mental burnout or something. I think that I need to flip my camera so that it shows up properly. Otherwise, everything I say and do will be backwards. And there we go. Fixed. And OBS, let's pull this over a little bit. There we go. Otherwise it'll just completely mess with me. Alright. So thank you all to everyone that voted on Twitter for what type of thing they would like me to stream tonight. Really saves me from having to actually pick things out, which is really great. And since you guys all decided to pick texture tutorial, that's what we're going to be doing tonight. So just bear with me while I do a couple things real quick, get everything set up. And yep. Okay, alright, here we go. Why does it always do that to me? I don't like it. I don't want that on there either. Twitter's just going off like crazy. Okay, textures. Textures. Alright, so as usual with most of my art tutorials and map tutorials and things like that, I'm going to be using Photoshop. It's an older version of Photoshop, so if you have a newer version, you could probably do everything I can do. Well, you can do everything I can do and more, probably easier, lots of different shortcuts. You can also do everything that I'm doing in a free program called GIMP. Some of the tools will be different names. You might have to download a couple add-ons to get certain things, but for the most part, you can get everything that you need for free out of GIMP that Photoshop is going to offer. So, let's go ahead and start. What we're going to do first is we're going to talk about basically like what the purpose of a texture is. And to me, the entire point of a texture is to give your maps kind of like a nice feel to them. Texture is a very, very simple word, but it gives your maps a nice feel to them. It kind of brings maps to like that next level, and I think that a lot of it has to do with kind of adding a lot of flavor to a map for minimal amounts of effort. And I think that's really like the important thing when it comes to dealing with textures and stuff like that. Now, textures can be very, very simple. Something along the lines of, instead of just having a green wall, you can have a green wall with some splotches on it. And that's technically adding texture to something. But they can also get very, very detailed, and you can go really in depth. You can actually have photorealistic textures where you can actually go take a picture of something like a brick wall or concrete or something like that, and you can use that as a texture in and of itself. But there are other types of textures that you can do too. One that I really, really love is hand-painted textures, and it's really prevalent in a lot of video games and stuff right now. It's kind of like the in style. Now, what I'm going to be showing is kind of a few different techniques on how to just make your own textures and not really getting like super in depth. Like, this is not going to be a showcase of all of the best ways to make the most amazing looking texture. This is more of giving people that don't really have any idea of what a texture is, how to use it, how to put one together, giving those people a kind of just general insight on, look, with some simple stuff, especially like a free program like GIMP, mouse and keyboard, you can build your own textures to use in your own battle maps, and it'll work perfectly fine. So, one of the first things I'm going to do is um, I'm going to go ahead and open up, well, I already have one open, but I'll close this out. Don't want to change anything to it. What we're going to do is we're going to go in, we're going to open up a new file. We're going to start with just a blank file, 1024 by 1024 at 72 pixels per inch resolution. This is fine. You can change this. Some people build their textures at 512, at 72. Some build higher resolution textures. You know, they'll have 3000 by 3000 at 150 dpi. It all is kind of dependent on, you know, what you feel like. This is kind of a general, just halfway decent beginning area for, you know, your textures, and then you downsize them to fit on the maps that you want. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to hit OK, and it's going to create a layer here, or a new sheet. Yep, there it goes. Taking a little longer because I have my camera and my OBS running right now. So, and then what we want is we want a grid on here. Now, the reason that we want the grid on here is because it's nice when you're building like stone textures, you know, bricks, wood planks, stone tiles, things like that, that have some sort of structure to them. It's nice to have the kind of layout set up for, you know, lining things up. So to get the grid to where we want it, and I always change my grid depending on what kind of map and stuff I'm making. So to get the grid where we want it for this, you go in, you go into Edit, head on down to Preferences, Guides, Grids, and Slices, go to your grid. I have grid line every 512 pixels, which is essentially cutting this in half right here. And then I also have 4 subdivisions for each of these, so it gives you kind of like 2 different levels of a grid. You can change this to whatever you want. You can have this at 32 by 32 with 1 subdivision. You can have it however you want to set it up. I'm going with 512 pixels to cut it in half, and then I'm dividing each of those sections into a 4 by 4 section, just for simplicity's sake. So, what are we going to be doing? Well, we're going to go in and take a look. I went too far. We're going to take a look at textures. So I'll open up this one here, and I will open up, I'll do this one here. Why not? So these are 2 different basic kind of concepts of textures. This one here is a what's called a seamless texture. Well, technically they're both seamless. I kind of just threw this one together fairly quickly myself, and it's essentially it's a grass texture that I use in a lot of my battle maps. It's not the most amazing thing in the world. It has some issues and stuff like that, but the thing that's really nice about it is that it's seamless, which means that if I were to take this and let's just open up a new let's open up a new thing. Say we're building a battle map, 700 pixels by 700 if I was on roll 20 at 70 per inch. Hit OK. So the great thing about this is going to come in, it's going to be way too big for this because it's basically twice this size. But we can size this down to whatever we want, which is another great thing about textures. And if you want, you know, you could have this, it would layer all the way across the whole battle map. I don't necessarily want that if I'm doing this. I would probably have it smaller so that the details are less. And like I said before, texture, a lot of it has to do with adding a lot of kind of like depth and flavor and feel to your battle maps without a lot of effort. So when you make the texture, you find the texture, you set it up, then you can just go ahead and throw it in here, layer it a couple times, and it gives it good. Texture also does another thing, which is to kind of just like trick the eye. You're trying to add that illusion of depth, that feel to it, but you don't want people to be staring at the texture, picking it apart. Now, if you're actually like drawing something and people are going to be taking it as a whole, then yeah, you know, they're going to sit there and meticulate over every single detail. But for most of the time when you're making a texture, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. It just kind of has to give the illusion that you're going for. And then it doesn't, one of the main things with textures is you don't want there to be any kind of like glaring thing that draws the eye in, which is why seamless texture is really good. So as I was saying, if we duplicate this, we bring it right here and snap it on to this one, you can't see the seam when you're looking at this. And that's really the important thing. If we were to duplicate both of these, bring it down, and then bring it up, you really can't see where these textures are lining up. And that's the whole point of this, because when you're putting this into a map, you just want to throw this together, layer it across the whole entire thing, and be done with it. You don't want to be in here trying to draw, line up, and make sure that every single line on this texture is perfectly great. And if it doesn't line up perfectly, if there is this kind of like glaring line there, then that's going to kind of draw the eye towards it, and it's going to defeat the purpose of the texture. See, right now, this being pulled out, if you had players on this sort of background, it just kind of has the illusion of grass. There's no features that draw your eye towards it. So when the players are setting their tokens on it, they know that that's grass there. It works for them, and it doesn't have anything that stands out to them that draws their eye in. So they can just, it's grass, and then their mind goes over it. It kind of glosses over it. And that's the whole point of a texture. Hi, Lindsay. Thank you for coming in. So that's just kind of like an example of what the texture, like what the point of a texture in a battle map is. Alright, so no, we don't want to save that. Alright, and then we have this texture. Now this is kind of an example of a very, very simple hand-painted texture. It's just broken stone. When you're looking at it, you really can tell that's exactly what it is, and that's fine. That's all it's for. This wouldn't work perfectly well for a seamless texture, even though it is seamless because it has the black line around it. So when you put them next to each other, it is just black line against black line, and it works really, really well. But the problem is that it is very repeating. So with a texture like this, you'd either need to make it larger with more stones in it, or you need to make multiple types of this texture in this style in order to essentially not have one that stands out over and over and over again, because not every stone tile in a dungeon is going to crack and break in the exact same way, and players again are going to notice that. They're going to pick up on it. So these are two of the kind of textures that I'm going to kind of showcase on like really simple, really easy ways to make them, and how basically anyone can do it. And that's a big thing. So the broken stone texture, and then the grass texture here. That's what we're going to go ahead and do. So let's go ahead and start. We have our, well, for the third time, we have our background here, 1024, 72 pixels, and we have our grids on it. So what do we want to do? Well, first off, we want to kind of pick just like a base color. Now, a lot of people will say that picking a base color is really, really important. I'm more of the mind that you kind of want to get close to what you want. If we're looking for a grass texture, we want to get close, but you can always adjust your textures later, and that's a really important thing to remember, that the hues and saturations and things like that can be stretched. You can take a grass texture that you have, and you can stretch it to make it more yellow or more brown or more vibrant green. If you really want to go crazy, you can make it blue. That's kind of like the magic of Photoshop, but you know, if you're starting just so you have a base to kind of go off of, we want to make it just kind of like a generic color in the ballpark of what you're trying to get. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have our base color, and then you want to go ahead and fill it. You can do this multiple ways, but if you just hold shift and hit backspace, it's going to bring this up. Little foreground color, hit OK. It's going to fill it in with green. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to rename this base. Now I'm going to show you a couple little tricks on how to make a texture seamless. And the first one is basically you can use it on almost anything. Even if you take a picture of something like a stone wall and you load it into Photoshop and you want to make it a seamless texture, you can use this technique I'm going to show you to go ahead and do that. But we kind of got to get there first. And then I'll show you another trick where you almost don't have to do, well, actually you don't have to do any work whatsoever because Photoshop does all the work for you. Hey Noof, how's it going? Okay, so and again, I have all of my stuff on my laptop, so it's way over here. So when I have to lean over, I apologize, but that's the only way I can safely run everything is to kind of offload some of it over there. So we have our base. We're going to be making our grass texture. So what we want to do is want to kind of just, again, give the illusion of grass. We don't, and for hand painting, there are people that will go in here, and it's easier on a tablet, but they'll go in here and they will literally sit here and they will hand paint out, that's such a huge brush. They will literally, hand paint out little blades of grass in here, and I'm using a mouse, so it's like impossible. I can't do it. But they'll literally go in here and they'll paint out blades of grass. We're not going to do that. We're going to be lazy, and we're going to let Photoshop do a lot of the work, which is kind of how I do most of my art. So what we're going to do is you can download it. A lot of Photoshop comes with brushes that'll work for this, but we're going to use this right here. This is essentially kind of a grass, to me, it looks like a grass brush. You can download other ones if you'd like, but to me this kind of really fits the bill. It came with Photoshop, it's really nice. So you want to get this, get it to, a decent size. It doesn't have to be huge. It can be a little smaller than this if you want. We can make it, say 75 pixels if we wanted to. There you go. And then we want to go in here to brush dynamics. And again, in GIMP it might be called something different. What we're looking for is shapes and scattering, and not necessarily color dynamics. Other dynamics, maybe if you'd like, you can do this. Smoothing isn't really important, but okay, so what you're really looking for is shape dynamics. You want the size jitter. If you don't have any size jitter, they're all going to always be exactly the same length. And if you think about it, like we were talking about before, when you're thinking about texture, you want to kind of just like trick the eye. You want things to blend in. You want things to just like melt away. If everything is 100% uniform all the time, it's a really big tell to like the human brain that something's not right here. So you want to kind of like, you want to mix everything up. You want to have all the sizes different. You want to have everything at slightly different angles. You want to have, different levels of opacity, different colors, stuff like that. If everything's 100% uniform, it looks very man-made. Now that might be fine if you're trying to make a texture for something like, an elvish temple where everything is 100% perfect, but we're trying to make grass, and if you go outside and measure one piece of grass to the next, you're going to be really hard-pressed to find two that are exactly the same. So we want the size jitter on. We want it to really differentiate between the sizes. We also want the angle jitter on. I want the grass to be kind of like thrown in there all over the place. It doesn't have to be, super high up. You can adjust it a little bit, but I want the grass to go all over. I don't want it to look like this. I'm not trying to get perfect rows of grass here because again, and that might be okay for certain things, but when you're thinking about looking at it from the top down, all the grass doesn't lay one way like this. So we're kind of looking at it from a top-down angle for a battle map specifically. So we're going to want to go ahead and turn this all sort of different which ways. Roundness doesn't really matter too much. You can leave it on if you want. It fluctuates it a little bit, but this brush in particular isn't really going to see much of a difference between that. Now we want to go to scattering. So what scattering does is it separates the brushes out, each pinpoint on the brush from each other. So instead of having it like this, where they're all stacked on top of each other, if you scatter it, and this here is clicked on both axes, that's to make them scatter up and across. So if you scatter it out, now when we start to paint, you're starting to see how it's starting to kind of throw it all over the place instead of in a straight line, which is really what we're looking for. And then you can go for the count. You can really pack them in there, but I tend to leave the count down quite a bit. And you can do count jitter if you want, which will make it a little bit more random. Uh, it doesn't really matter too much. And then to show you both axes does change it a little bit. This just makes it kind of go up and down, whereas this kind of throws it all over the place. So I'm pretty good with this right here. We're getting a brush. We're getting to the point where we have a brush that's very random. I don't really see a repeating pattern in it, and that's really what we're looking for. Now that we kind of have our brush where we want it, we need to talk about the next really, really important part of texture. And it's not as important in this grass texture, although it does play a huge part. But the next really, really super important thing is that you're taking a 2D item. You're basically taking colors on a screen and you're trying to make them pop out a little bit. You're trying to make them have feel to them. You want it to feel like you can run your hand over it. And the way that you do that with a 2D picture is with highlights and shadows. You have to trick the eye into thinking that there's depth there. And all depth in the world, if you go out and you look at anything, it's created by highlights and shadows of light bouncing off of it. This will come into play a lot more with the stone texture that we'll be making next than it will with the grass texture. But it does come into play here. If we were to just go, we have one color, we throw a lighter color on top of it, and we're good, it's like, that doesn't quite work. What you really want to do is you want to have this feel like there's a lot of depth going on. You want there to be areas that are light, areas that are dark. You want to have different things going on and fluctuating in between each other. So we have to make sure that we do that. So we're going to make sure that we make two different layers. We're going to have highlights and shadows. And again, this doesn't necessarily work exactly the same way in the grass texture, the way that I'm doing it at least, but it's the general principle of it. So we have our base color here. We want to highlight. Well, what we can do is we can go in here and you can literally just drag this up and get a lighter color. I tend to kind of take some of the green out of it, but now we have a color that's similar to that one, but it's just a little bit lighter. And that's what we're looking for. And then for our shadows, we want to do the same thing. Let's grab our original color, then we'll keep our highlight color over there, and we'll bring this down and in a little bit. It doesn't have to be exact, just something that looks okay. And this is going to give us our darker colors. Okay. Alright. So now you have your highlights and your shadows. Make sure you're on the right layer for them. And that'll come into play a little bit later too. So now what you need to do, very, very simply, is just take your texture and start making it. Doesn't have to be exact, kind of fill it in, leave some spots that are a little less filled in. You know, and it's really kind of as simple as that. I might not quite like that. I didn't like some of it. Just go ahead and erase it and go back through. Do it again. Touch up some spots if you miss some. You know, doesn't have to be 100%. Looks pretty good. Switch over to our shadows. Do the same thing. And there you go. Now if you really want, you could almost leave it like this. This could be a grass texture. One of the things that you'll have an issue with is it won't be seamless. We'll go a little bit more in depth into this. And one of the things that I think that we can do very easily is we can look at maybe taking the highlights and shadows, maybe changing the type of blend mode that's on them. You know, you can make them just, you know, scroll through them, see what you like. This, I kind of like it, kind of mixes in a little bit well. with what's going on there and let some of the highlights come through. But you know, scroll through, see if you see anything that catches your eye. That kind of looks okay. That's not too bad. Luminosity almost looks exactly the same as the darker color did. Or was it? Darker color. Yeah, they look basically exactly the same. Highlights, you can do the same thing. Just go through, see what you get. That's not too bad. I kind of like that, but let's scroll through. Yeah, that works. Let's take this, and now what you can do is take them and duplicate them. And this is all just kind of like building on that depth and that feel to it. Like I said, you could leave it exactly how it was if you wanted to, but you don't have to. Let's take this one and let us put it back up to normal. This one's darker color, this one's normal. So let's just grab one. Let's just rotate it, move it a little bit, fill it in. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Grab it, rotate it, and just get it to fill in a little bit more. Now, I'm going to take it after I do that. So what I'm doing here is I'm just offsetting it a little bit, so it's separate from the layer that it was duplicated from. So when we have it like this, let's take it and we want to move it down to let some of the other highlights come through. We could probably even put it in between the two layers. It doesn't really matter too much. And then we'll do the same thing with the highlights. We can move it in between, and let's take it and rotate it and make it a little bit larger. There you go. And we can move it in between the layers to kind of get this little bit of a busy feel going on. Alright, that's not too bad. So you have your kind of grass looking layer going on. If you're comfortable with this, which I think I'm okay with it for now, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can play with it a little bit more if you want, but I'm alright with it. What I'm going to do is go ahead and merge the layers together. And you can merge all of them if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and just merge the grass textures together. Put them all on one layer. Now you can do go through your filters, and there's a lot of different filters that can give different types of feels to it. One that I kind of like is this dry brush filter. I think it's really good. You can play with it a little bit to get what you want out of it, but it's a little bit hard to see without that background on there. If we let it load in, get a little bit of texture in there, and you can just hit OK. Yeah, that's too much. Filter, artistic, dry brush. That's way too much. Let's get the brush size to go way down. Brush detail down a little bit, texture, yeah, let's try that. That's not too bad. It's not terrible. It's okay. It's not great. For the grass, let's see. Oh, of course I broke it. Huh. I went too far. Alright. But for the grass, that's not terribly bad. It's not great, but it's not the best in the world. But of course I went too far. I went to too many steps and broke it because I'm the best. That's why you should always duplicate your layers and always back it up. Let's try this. Duplicate. Make one of them screen. Make one of them overlay. No? Yeah, that's not bad. Screen. And multiply. There you go. Now you're cooking with oil. No, I hate it. I immediately hate it. Alright. Brush. I'm just going to redo it real quick because I can. I didn't like it at all. And then new layer. Darker color. And new layer, lighter color. And new layer, darker color again. There you go. Yes, that's much better. I like that a lot better. Any questions? Bevel and emboss everything. Yeah, we're gonna add lens flare and some film grain later on Noof, so it'll look super sick and badass. Yeah, you can do some layer styles and things like that, but for most of the textures, I don't think that they work out too well. This is the lighter color here, so I'm just gonna touch up some of these corners. And then what we'll do is, if you really want to get into it, you can go on to a layer just below the base layer if you want to add just like a little extra level of depth. And you can grab like a brownish color. Take a bit of a funky texture here. Let's do this. Nope, that's horrible. That did not work how I wanted at all. Other dynamics, scattering. There you go. Shape dynamics. Angle jitter doesn't matter too much, but the scattering really does. Yep. Okay, that's what I was trying to go for. And just take that like that. Maybe switch through the blend modes. Let's see what we can get. That's what I'm kind of going for. You can get that kind of like dirt feel going through there. Some of these, maybe screen them out. Just kind of play around with what you have going on. You might find something that you like out of it. I kind of like that. I like the way that that looks pretty solid, I think. And if we turn off our grid here for a second, you see what I'm talking about. And as you zoom out, you want to kind of look at it from what you think it's going to look like on the battle map. Zoom out, see how it looks. To me, that looks like a pretty nice dirt texture. It has a lot of depth. I can see some light coming off of it. The dark spots kind of draw you in a little bit. There's a little bit of modeling and patching. And if you were to take this and layer it over and over and over again, I don't think that it's going to catch your eye very much. So now let's go through, and what we're going to do is we're going to make this seamless. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, first off, what you want to do is you want to save your file, because saving is always good. So I have my custom texture file here, and I'm going to go with, let's go with grass/mud. Yeah, grass muddy. We're going to save it. We're going to hit OK. And then we're going to delete these two layers. We don't really need them. Delete. Yes. You can also drag these down. Delete. Yes. Then we're going to go through, and what we're going to do is we're going to merge all the layers together. Now, what's going to happen is if we take this texture, and I'm just going to show you guys what I'm talking about. If we take this texture and we bring up our example from before, if we're making, say we're making a battle map, if we were to take this texture and just drop it in here. Now again, it's going to be very, very large, but if we size this down to about what we would use it for on a battle map, which for me would probably be something in that region. If we take this and we duplicate it, and we size them up next to each other, and we zoom in on it, what you can see is some very, very hard lines. And you can see what I'm talking about right here. This very like jarring kind of line that's right there that is really going to just like draw your eye in every time. And if we duplicate it again, you're going to see that you're going to get this kind of jarring line going across the top as well. And it's really not attractive. And as you zoom out, what you're going to see is you're going to see these kind of shaded lines. They're going to have very, very like a man-made kind of feel to them. And we want to kind of just get rid of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to, of course, it's going to bing right in my ear. what we're going to do is we're going to turn this texture over here into what's called a seamless texture. Now the way to do that is you go up here to filter, you go to other, and you click this one. It's called offset. What offset does is and it has a lot of different settings in here. Well, not too many different settings, but it has a thing called wraparound, and then you can choose the offset by however much. It doesn't matter too much. You don't have to be 100%, 50% down the middle, 50% down the middle. That's just how I tend to have it set up because it's easier for me. And then with the preview, you can see this is our normal texture, and this is after we offset it. And what it's basically done is it's taken the corners, it's taken all the edges and wrapped them around and put them in the middle here. So what you're seeing here is where it would normally line up against another, against another texture of the same kind. This top corner is now lining up with its own bottom corner, and that's what we want, because this is going to let us see where it's going to wrap around. Now we know that these corners here already line up with the other corners because they're already in the middle. These new edges are pulled straight from the middle here. So we want it like that. Let's go ahead and click OK. And it's important to save in case you mess up. But then what you want to do is you want to go over here to the spot healing brush. You can do this different ways. The spot healing brush is the easiest way. Again, we're letting Photoshop do a lot of the work here. And you want to kind of just zoom in to the center here, and you want to just take small sections and just brush. Just, it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't try and do all of it at once like this, because you're going to get, like a lot of times what you'll end up with is some really weird stuff. So just take it little bit by little bit and just click and let Photoshop do its thing. You're going to see at times where you get extra lines coming in from other parts. That's because Photoshop is pulling from other parts of the image to fill in the blanks, essentially, to make it look like it's one cohesive thing. So just go ahead and, clean them up as best you can. There we go. Little by little, until your own eye doesn't really see where that hard seam is. Now you want a brush that's large enough to cover both sides of the seam, but you don't want it too big, because you want the texture that you've created to come into the spot that you're trying to fill. You don't want to, take out a huge chunk of your own texture. So we're just going in, and little bit by little bit, we're just going to fill this up and get rid of all those little spots, those little kind of like eyesores. And we're going to paint a happy little bush over there. There we go. You really want to go for those hard edges. They're the ones that are going to stand out the most to you. Down here it's not such a hard edge, but we're going to take it anyways because it's kind of like a better safe than sorry type thing. Got to go out a little bit this way. There's some stuff going on in there, stuff in there. There you go. So what you've essentially created now, sort of, is a seamless texture. There's a bit going on in here that I don't like. I can still see kind of like a bit of a ghosting of an edge there. So now if you take this texture and you're to line it up with another, and we can check it as well by going back into offset, you can start bumping this across and just picking different things to see if it spins, and you might be able to see where the line is. You can go in and touch these up a bit more if you want. Like I see this line right here because it just stands out to me personally. So you can come in here and just touch them up a little bit more wherever they line up and they're not perfect. There you go. And eventually what you'll end up with is a seamless texture. So filter, offset, and then just check it. And if it looks good, feels like you got it, hit OK, hit File, Save As, and you can do grass muddy. You can save it. Yep, let's get rid of that one. And then you also can save it as a JPEG, because that's generally what you're going to be using. And save it in a high resolution, you're good to go. Now what we can do is we can come over here and we can, I know, I keep doing the wrong thing. come over here and we can check our new texture out. And the way that you do that is size it down to something usable. It doesn't have to be exact, but something usable. Duplicate it and put it up next to itself. And it's not exactly next to itself. There we go. Like that. And if you zoom out, now you see these hard lines that you see in your old one before you did the seamless texture, and now look at it. And you're not going to see those. So if we take this and we get rid of all these here, and we duplicate these, you know, take these ones, duplicate them like we were building a battle map, make sure that they line up. Take all of these and duplicate them, move them over, make sure that that white line goes away. Take all of these, duplicate them, or we can even merge them, but let's duplicate them, move it down, and there you go. Now you have your texture, and you'll start to see that there's some repeating. I was a little bit quick on this. I would go through and make it a little bit more uniform, make it less light in like this area, kind of make the mud pattern cross over everything. But it's a lot less conspicuous than what was going on. What was going on with these here. Sorry about that. And I think it's pretty obvious once you start looking at it, once you start building, what exactly the difference is. And when you get a little bit more practiced at it, it's gonna become easier and easier to do. Now the other great thing is with how seamless this texture is, and again there are some issues with you know, these areas not looking perfect. Well, you can get your texture how you want it, and then you can get rid of those areas pretty easily by blending both the old texture, or the texture, rotate it a little bit, move it a little bit, and then blend them together. Throw a layer mask on there, get a brush that's a decent size for what you want to do, and just start taking some of these edges away and blending them in together to get rid of that kind of like very uniform look. And there you go. Now you have your seamless texture ready for your players to go on. You can throw a little town in there, you can throw a road going through there, whatever you want, and that's that. That's your grass texture. You're done. That's basically it. And personally speaking, I think that looks pretty good for a hastily kind of drawn, thrown together texture. And again, when you're looking at these things, the players aren't going to be zoomed in like this. The players are going to be out here. And also in Roll20, this would only be 10 by 10, which is a fairly small map. So there you go, grass texture. So before I move on to the next one, does anyone have any questions or anything? I don't know, there's not too many people in chat right now, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to type it in and let me know. And I'm going to turn on a light because it's very dark all of a sudden. Okay, there we go. It's a little bit brighter. Not terribly dark anymore. Alright, well, seeing as no one's in here and there are no questions, I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the next little bit, which is going to be a bit more of the like technical one. This one was fairly simple, pretty easy to throw together. Now I'm going to move on to the little bit more difficult kind of like hand painting one. It's definitely a lot easier to do with a uh, tablet and doing it actually by hand, which is why it's called hand painting. But you can actually get away with a lot of it with a mouse and a keyboard. So let's go ahead and close out our grass texture. Let us close out our example of how well our grass texture worked. We don't need to save that. And let us make a new 1024 by 1024. That didn't work. By 72. Bit. Okay. Now for this one, what we're going to do is we're definitely going to use the grid for this one, because I'm going to do more of a stone tiled sort of hand painted texture this time around. So for this, we again want to pick our base layer. For stone, I tend to think kind of like terracotta looking, kind of an orangish gray, a little bit of red tones in there, kind of warm. You can definitely go for a more, what do they call it, like a cooler kind of stone slate looking gray if you want, something in like this territory. That definitely works too. I'm a very, very big fan of not making things just gray. I like to have, a blue-gray, a red-gray, something of that nature. So what I'm going to work with today, I think, is kind of like an orangish, brownish, reddish color, something like that. Alright, let's go ahead and fill our layer in. So that's what we're going to be working with. That's our base layer, essentially. We don't really need the background on, but we do want another layer. And on this layer, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of block in the like general idea of what like our stone is going to like the, how do you want to say it, like the grout lines or the crack lines. This is basically going to be our shadows, our kind of like deep recessed stuff, and that's pretty important, I think. So let's get a solid brush. You don't want a soft brush. You don't want kind of like soft edges for this. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. And I need to turn on a setting really quick. There it is. Brush to guidelines. There it is. Draw your path. No. There was a way to do it, but it's not working. I'll just do it by hand. So for our shadows, let's take our existing color and let's go down. Darker, more saturated, definitely more towards the like black of the spectrum. And we definitely want to go in here and get a outline. And this will essentially make our background have a seamless texture as is. So we're just going to go in. Let's get the outside of it settled. Alright. And and you'll see where I'm going with this in a second. Now, since we're going to be going for a broken stone, we want it to have a bit of kind of, you know, feel to it, a bit of flavor to it. It's not going to be so precise. And again, I'm just doing all this with a mouse. There we go. So we have our basics set up. Just like that. Now, you want to make sure that this is on a separate layer because you're going to be using this a lot. And once you get it kind of set in, you'll probably want to duplicate the layer just to be on the safe side. But for now, this is what we're going to do. So you want to make these not so exact. And for me, because I have it snapped is set on, I'm going to turn the grid off for now. So you want it to be not so exact. You know, you want to have a couple cracks in there. So we're going to have, you know, this bit of stone is going to be broken off. This probably will be a little shoddy and not perfectly covered. This is going to be chipped away a little bit. You know, it's not going to be 100%. So we're going to go through and we're going to make the lines a little thicker, a little bit bolder, and we're just kind of like blocking in what we want it to look like. Now, you want to leave the outside here. You want to have a little bit of black all the way around the outside, or shadow color all the way around the outside, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a seamless texture without having to worry too much about it. And there are other ways to do that, but this is kind of a cheater way, and I like cheater ways because, you know, again, we're trying to make Photoshop do a lot of our work for us. You can't be making a hand-drawn texture every 2 seconds. Alright, there we go. This is starting to look a little bit better. I don't want it all to be too much. And there you go. And this doesn't have to be perfect again. You just want it to roughly be what you want. You know, I might want one of these to go like this. I might want a crack to go up, maybe like that, and maybe a crack like that, possibly a crack like that. You know, a couple of them. Maybe this one's a little shattered or something. Maybe it's got some chips in it. We'll go like that. There you go. And that can go down like that. There. And we're going to do this. And some of those. Just fill it in, make it a little bit thicker. Now this looks very, very roughly drawn. Maybe a bit like, you know, a small child or something did it, and that's fine. When you're zooming out, though, you're starting to kind of see what we're doing here. So you want to come back in, and now comes the fun part where you want to take your eraser, again with a hard brush, but a smaller brush than the one that you used. So we were using 25. On our eraser brush, probably use like a 10. It doesn't have to be exact again, you can use whichever you'd like. But then, similar to how I do my coastlines in my world map tutorial, you want to go through and you want to start cleaning this up, chiseling some of this away. And this is kind of like another basic kind of tip when you're drawing in Photoshop, especially with a mouse. It's a lot easier to get kind of the look that you want by erasing than it is by drawing it in. And I'm not exactly sure why, but it just seems to be the way of it. But if you go in there, you can get it. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect. You want it to look a little rough, a little handmade, a little worn. You can turn your grid on and off, because you don't ever really want to go over the line too much, because again, it is supposed to be 4 pieces that are lined up fairly perfectly. You want to make sure that all these little sections are filled in, though. And then go back to your eraser tool and keep at it. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want it to work. Let's go in here. Want this to look very jagged and broken, and you can leave some of these pieces if you want. that you kind of like carve off. You don't have to, but you can. And it'll add a little bit of kind of depth and little, you know, little flavor to those as well. But you just want it to look very rough and kind of broken and jagged. It looks like it cracked. Think of what a crack in a stone looks like. You're kind of imitating that. And just going to go through, carve it down, follow the line, but don't be afraid to deviate from it. When you get to these edges here, you don't want to have a hard ending. You want to kind of let it break into it, break out. If you do a very hard corner, it looks very unnatural. And then we're going to go in here. We're going to go ahead and keep cleaning all this up. Make sure we get all that. You know, you can bring the corners out as far as you want. And again, you want to leave some of the black line out there, but you don't have to leave all of it. You can go up higher in some places if you want to do that to make it look a little more, you know, uneven and kind of warped. Give it that kind of feel to it. There you go. Take this, zoom it down, and rinse, lather, repeat. You're kind of seeing the pattern here, I'm sure. This is a bit of the tedious part of doing this process, but with a mouse, hand painting, this is one of the easier ways to do it that I've found. If you guys find other ones, you know, leave me a comment. Let me know. I'm always willing to check them out. We'll leave that there. We'll play with that a little bit later. Cracks worn in. Okay. So right now what we're doing is we're just kind of sketching. We're getting the basis for what we want our texture to look like. Now, and when you zoom out, this bit of stone is starting to look more like what I was hoping. It's got the crack in it. It's good to go. Could probably do with some more cleanup down here. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it's definitely starting to look like what I was hoping for. Now we're going to go to this next one. This one's going to be a bit more of a pain. Let's take this like this. It'll be easier if we zoom in a little bit. Alright, carve it up. Alright. Lots of rapid clicking, or you can just drag and try and do it. I find kind of like a good mixture of both is usually the best for me. There we go. And I'll probably go through here and change this up. Yeah, let's try it like that. There we go. Let's try that. And again, it's a little tedious, but you're really just kind of looking for broken up, jagged, unnatural looking. Again, you don't want it to look like you drew this in. You want it to look random. So, you know, one of the easier ways to do that is to be a little sporadic with your hand motions. You know, don't draw things perfectly. This is okay. It's not perfect. I would probably change a lot of things if I weren't doing this for a tutorial. But it doesn't have to be changed. You know, you can do it like this. This will be fine, and it'll work great for what you want it to work for. Sorry, I'm trying to like draw and talk at the same time. Apparently, I'm really bad at it. Good thing I'm not boring anyone out there. How's everyone doing tonight? Hi, Utterly Yours. How are you doing? Alright. So, again, we're just trying to get it. This looks a little too straight, so I'm just going to kind of mess with it a little bit. zoom out and take a look at it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Doesn't look too bad. I'd probably change that up a little bit. It looks a little kind of scripted, but it's not terrible. And you guys will see what it'll kind of illustrate a good point later on when I'm going to talk about the highlighting and shadows of the piece. So again, we're just kind of cleaning it up a little bit, trying to make it look a little less childish and cartoony. Don't be afraid to go back and touch up some of the spots you've already messed with. That's perfectly fine. I do it all the time. Trying to run through these to make it a little less tedious for anyone that wants to watch this in the future. Alright, get rid of this, get rid of that. Take this, break it down. There you go. Now, alright. Okay, let's take it some. Worn and broken stone. There we go. Alright. Texture tutorial. If you guys have any questions, just throw them in the comments. This would be better with music, but I don't want it to get shut down and can't post it anywhere. Okay, there we go. So, and then add on so forth and so forth. What I'm going to do to speed this up a little bit, because I feel like it's taking a bit too long, I'm going to take this handy dandy tool right here, and I'm going to crop this down to just a quarter of it, like this. Now, in order to do this, so now you have your shadow layer, and now what you want to do is you want to add your highlight layer. And for your highlight layer, you do basically the same thing as your shadow layer. You take your base color, and then you kind of pull it up and out instead of down and in, and you'll get a nice little shadow layer that's kind of in the same color palette, or sorry, highlight layer that's in the same color palette. Now, for hand painting, one thing that's really, really important is direction of light. And for the sake of argument, we're going to say that our light source is up in the top left corner. So essentially, our light's going to be here, and it's going to be shining down like this. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is that light is going to catch on all of our quote-unquote edges, and it's going to catch on the edges, and then shadows are going to fall on the other side of it. So if we imagine, if you take a light and you lay it down on something, it's going to hit an edge on the side that's closest to the light, and it's going to cast shadow on this side. So keeping that in mind, if our shadow is the dark area and the base color is the area that is raised up to us, that's going to cause it to catch there. So what we're going to do is we can go in, and there are two ways to do this. There's the way that I like to do, which is done by hand, and it makes it actually, in my opinion, it kind of gives you a little bit more control over it. Or there's the other way where you can let the Photoshop do it, and I'll show you both ways so you can decide which one you want to use. So to use it by hand, what you do is you take your layer, you put it above your shadow layer, and you put a clipping mask on. And what a clipping mask does is it makes it so that you can color on the whole thing, but it'll only show up where the layer that it's clipped to shows up as well. So in this case, I can color here because the layer it's clipped to is the shadow layer, and the shadow layer is there. But if I color here, it doesn't show up because the shadow layer isn't there. Now, technically, if I release the clipping mask, I did color there. It's not gone. It's just that it's restricted to that layer that you're coloring on, essentially. So the reason that this is important is because with the clipping mask on, what you can do is you can come in here and take your area that has the light, and you can just color in and have it only show up on that clipping mask layer. Do it in small bursts so that if you need to, and you can also use a much smaller brush. I don't need to be using this giant brush. You can use a much smaller brush, and you're just trying to highlight that edge, um, just to give it the kind of illusion that light is cascading off of it. And what I like to do, and this is why I really like doing this by hand versus the other way, which is what I'm going to show you next. Where there are dips that you've created in the stone, you can create more of an illusion that there's depth there by letting yourself brush in a bigger area. And it allows you to make it look like it's chipped away and kind of slanting up more, and it gives you a lot more control. Again, like I was talking about before, where you don't want to have this kind of like uniformity. You don't want everything to be the exact same, thickness all the way across. The way that the computer can do it with the way that Photoshop can handle it, it gives it the same effect. You can put a highlight all on one side, but it's going to make it look all the same kind of thickness, and it has a bit more of a stagnant kind of look to it, I feel like. So if you really want to, you can go through, which is what I do, and you can just paint your highlights in. And remember, you want to paint them in where you see the light. Where you wouldn't see the light, where it starts to fade off, you want to kind of like dip away. And this is what I'm talking about right here. If the light is coming from up in the top left-hand direction, which would be over here, and it's shining down, like this, well, when this light comes over and hits all these pieces, and it wouldn't hit here because it's blocked. So what it would do is it would hit the other edge, but it wouldn't hit this edge because that's where the shadow is going to fall, and that's what's going to give you the illusion of depth. So we're going to let the light fade off there, and we're going to pick it back up here. And it's okay to kind of like have that little bit of a ball that kind of sticks up off the top, because we can go back in with our eraser tool and we can just clean that up. So don't worry too much about that. And then go back to your brush and continue on. And just keep brushing it in. And again, stop every now and then, because if you do the whole entire piece and then you made a mistake, you have to redo the whole piece. So it's really good to kind of just, stop every now and then, so that if you want to get rid of a bit, you can just by hitting Control Z. Every now and then, take a second, stop, and zoom out, and you're going to start to see that it's starting to come alive. And again, you're going to be seeing the textures out here. You're not going to be seeing them zoomed in all the time. And you can start to see how it starts to have that feel of light is kind of like bouncing off of all these different spots and pieces. So just continue on doing that wherever the light would come down. Remember, top left, top left. So it would probably not hit this part here, but it would hit for instance, I'm using the eraser again, it would hit like here. And then it might fade away again. Not hitting this so much, maybe trickles down, comes back in right here. This is facing that light direction a little bit more, so it might show up a lot here, and then trickles down and away, and then wouldn't be hitting the backside here at all. Doesn't hit any of this, but it would probably hit off the top of this, kind of in opposite of where it's missing here. It might hit over here. This, maybe not so much. Maybe take some of that down like that, and go back through. Just to give it that little bit of kind of depth. And it starts to pop up a little bit more, starts to come alive a little bit. Go back through, do this whole side down here. And again, I would be a little bit smoother, a little bit faster, a little bit more precise with this if it was just if it was something that I was doing uh, for me, not specifically for the tutorial. Oops. And let's go like this, and then it would kind of fade off from the light there. And then again down here, kind of just give it that little bit like that. And that's kind of the basics. You have your highlights, you have your dark bits. The easier way to do that, if you really want to know, double click on this. In GIMP you have to download an add-on to get the layer styles, but in Photoshop they come just standard. And you can do a bevel and emboss. Now you don't want an inner bevel, you want an outer bevel, smooth, chisel, hard. You can do this, it'll bevel and emboss it. That's one way. You can also do a drop shadow. And with the drop shadow, we'll just take this color here, hit OK. Multiply won't work because it's a lighter color, so you go to screen, or you can go to normal if you want, opacity all the way up. And then just change your direction, your light direction. You can put it up there, it'll give it nice highlights, things like that. But see how it doesn't look as hand done, it looks kind of computerized. It's not as great. That's kind of what I was getting at, is that kind of look to it isn't as kind of uniform, I guess is the right way to say that. You can mess with the distance if you want. You can do inner shadow as well. Same thing, go in here, take this color, hit OK, change it to screen, or change it to normal. Change the light over to where you want it, bump it up, and give it the distance that you want. The size, there you go. Turn the size all the way down, change the distance to where you want it. Now this is going to give you kind of the look that I was going for, and what you'll notice is that when you do this, if you put it in the right spot where the light is coming the same angle, that from the top left down, you're going to get the light in the same places. It's going to put the same effect as I was getting, with the added benefit that it's putting it out here, which you can easily cover up. You can do it with a drop shadow, it'll put it to the outside of it instead of the inner shadow, but you're going to get the same kind of effect, the same kind of look as I was getting with, if we turn this off, with this. They're in the same, essentially the same locations. You have this kind of inside area here, you have this top edge, but not this back edge. The same thing with this. This top edge here, but not this back edge, this edge here, this edge here. And that's basically what you're going for. But one thing you'll notice is that mine looks less uniform. It looks more broken up. It looks a little bit more, and again, I can go through and clean it up a little bit, but it looks a little bit more natural than this because it's always going to be the same look. Now this looks fine. I've used it before. It's a lot faster, and that's what's really great about it. And again, you can do inner shadow or drop shadow, works really well for this. Bump your size down, bump your distance up, and because it's a drop shadow, you're going to have to go the opposite direction than the one you were going in before. I don't even know how that guideline got in there, but you'll go the opposite direction because you're dropping it instead of highlighting it down, so you just have to keep that in mind. But it does get rid of that edge that's in there, and either one of these will work. You can, make the distance a little bit higher if you want, make it have a bit of a steeper edge, whichever. But that's the basics right there. You have your highlights, you have your shadows, you have your base color, and they all work together. Now this texture, or this stone kind of block as is, depending on which one you want to use, I would go with this one. I think it looks a little bit nicer, but it's up to you however you want to do it. Again, the other way is a lot faster, it's a lot easier. But um, one thing that you need is, I think you need a little bit more kind of to this. I think it's way too flat. So one thing that you can do is you can go in here and you can actually start adding things. You can start contouring things. You as you start learning more and more, you can start adding shadows and highlights that dip down into the cracks. But for the most part, I think what you want to do is just kind of ramp up your base layer a little bit. And you can do that kind of like what we did with the grass texture just a few minutes ago. You can come in here, you can get you know, a texture or a brush that has some feel to it. You know, something like this. You can go into your brush dynamics. You can turn on your scattering, and your shape dynamics can change. Why am I don't want dual brush, do I? There we go. And you can come in here and you can do this and just give it a little bit of a pop to it. And then when you put this across the top, it's going to hide those edges so you don't have to worry about making it seamless, which is really nice. But what you can also do is you have your highlight and your shadow layer. You can go in here and you can go to filter, you can go to render, and you can render difference clouds because the command area is empty. So let's duplicate this. Let's delete this layer. So you can go in here and you can do filter, you can go to render. So take a layer with your base color on it, go to render, go to difference clouds. Click it a few times until you get something that kind of like strikes your eye. I kind of like that, that's not too bad. And then what you can do is you can go through and you can put it on a layer like screen, color dodge, overlay would probably work, soft light works. Overlay, let's go with soft light. I kind of like this one. Maybe bump the opacity down a little bit. And see, you're not really looking for like a really harsh look. You want just that kind of like something that has a little bit of depth, a little bit of feel to it. You could duplicate this if you wanted to and rotate it and give it instead of a soft light, maybe you want to have a multiply or something like that. But give it difference clouds. This is another way to just add a little bit of texture feel to it using what Photoshop has to offer. It's really great. There's another added benefit of difference clouds, and that is that the way that difference clouds works is it's done by an equation that Photoshop does, and it automatically generates a seamless texture, which is really nice. So if we were to go in here with these difference clouds and we were to hit other and do offset, no matter what we do, it's always going to be seamless. So in this case, we're using this to hide those edges, but with difference clouds, if you're making a texture and you just want a little bit of kind of oomph to it, like maybe you're making just a single stone tile and you don't want to have those dark edges around the outside of it, you can render difference clouds and you don't have to worry about getting rid of the seams like we did in the grass texture, which is really nice. So let's go through and look up. We can do a couple more things here just to kind of add a little bit more to this. Let's delete this layer here. Let's see, we've got our clouds on. That adds a little bit of color to it, adds a little bit of more. Let's add another layer. Let's take our dark color here and let's go with a smaller color, or not smaller color, smaller brush, maybe a